Marcus sent his resignation email on a Thursday afternoon. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately, addressed to his manager, with HR copied. He kept it brief. Professional tone, no complaints, thanked everyone for the opportunity. He hit send at 3:47 p.m. and felt the relief wash over him. What Marcus didn't know was that his manager forwarded that email to 6 other people within 90 minutes, and 3 of them had hiring authority at companies where Marcus would eventually apply. The resignation letter isn't a formality you send and forget. It's a document that moves through networks you can't see, creating a data trail that outlasts your memory of writing it. Number 1. The forward chain you never authorized. When you submit a resignation letter, you're submitting it to one person, but that person operates inside a network with its own communication patterns. Your manager forwards it to their manager within the hour. HR creates a file. The department head gets copied. If you're in a specialized field, your departure gets mentioned in the next leadership meeting because your role needs backfilling, and budget reallocation happens in those rooms. By the end of week 1, between 8 and 15 people have seen your exact words. By month 2, recruiting coordinators at companies you've never heard of have your name in a spreadsheet with a note about voluntary departures. The mechanism works like this. Your manager knows other managers. Those managers move between companies. When they move, they bring their networks and their knowledge of who left where and how. A resignation letter you wrote in 2019 can surface in a 2024 reference check conversation. Not because anyone kept it in a file, but because someone kept it in their memory, attached to your name. The industry you work in determines how tight this network is. Smaller industries mean tighter loops. A resignation letter in pharmaceutical sales travels differently than one in consumer retail, but both travel farther than you think. Number 2, the relationship damage calculation. The mistake isn't leaving. The mistake is how the letter frames the departure, and specifically whether it preserves relationship equity or destroys it. Relationship equity is what someone in a position of influence is willing to spend on your behalf when you're not in the room. A former manager with intact relationship equity will route opportunities to you, flag your resume when it comes through their system, and speak specifically about your capabilities when someone asks. A former manager with damaged relationship equity will do none of those things, and in some cases, will actively signal that you're not worth the risk. The resignation letter sets this trajectory. If it reads as thoughtful departure with genuine appreciation, relationship equity holds. If it reads as escape, complaint, or contains any language that could be interpreted as criticism, the equity drops to 0. The problem is that you're writing it in an emotional state. You're leaving because something wasn't working. That dissatisfaction leaks into word choice. Phrases like pursuing other opportunities sound neutral, but can read as this wasn't good enough. Mentioning specific frustrations, even diplomatically, gets interpreted as blame. The reader is your manager, someone who has structural incentive to interpret departure as performance judgment on their leadership. They will read your letter through that lens, whether you intended it or not. Number 3, the boomerang probability you're eliminating. 17% of employees return to a former employer within 5 years. The technical term is boomerang hiring, and it happens because the person who left gained skills or experience the company now needs, and the company offers terms that make return attractive. Boomerang hires skip parts of the interview process, onboard faster, and often negotiate from a stronger position because both parties have information the typical hiring process doesn't provide. But boomerang hiring only works if the departure was clean. If your resignation letter damaged relationships, you're not eligible for boomerang consideration, no matter how strong your skill set gets. The filter happens before you even know the opportunity exists. A position opens. Someone in leadership mentions they need to backfill it. Your name comes up because you used to do that work. Then someone else in the room says something about how you left, and the conversation moves on. You never see the job posting. You never get the call. Your name just doesn't surface again. The cost of a poorly written resignation letter isn't immediate. It's the opportunity 3 years later that never materializes because someone remembered how you exited. The typical employee changes jobs 11 times across their career. The probability that you'll want to return to a previous employer, or that someone from a previous employer will be in a position to hire you somewhere else, is higher than most people calculate when they're writing the letter at 11 p.m. the night before they plan to quit. Number 4, the reference check that happens without calling you. Reference checks don't just happen during the formal process, where a recruiter asks for 3 names and contact numbers. They happen in the informal network before your resume even reaches the hiring manager's desk. Someone mentions they're looking at candidates for a role. Someone else mentions they know you, or knew you, or worked with you 5 years ago. The question gets asked, what was it like working with them? The answer to that question is shaped by the last interaction. And for a former manager, the last interaction is often your resignation. If the resignation felt abrupt, ungrateful, or antagonistic, that colors the response. The person asking doesn't hear about your project work or your skill development. They hear a subtle deflection, a careful neutrality, or in some cases, a clear signal that you're not worth pursuing. The conversation takes 90 seconds, and your candidacy is over before it started. You never know what happened. The company never tells you they decided to go another direction. You just don't get called back. Formal reference checks are manageable. You control the list. You prep the references. You know the call is coming. Informal reference checks are unmanageable. They happen in networks you can't see, between people you may not even know are connected. And they're weighted more heavily than formal references because they're perceived as more honest. A resignation letter that preserves goodwill keeps those informal references neutral to positive. A resignation letter that burns the bridge turns them negative, and you'll never know which job you didn't get because of a conversation you weren't part of. Number 5, what the letter should actually contain. The functional resignation letter is 4 sentences. Sentence 1 states the fact of resignation and the effective date. I am resigning from my position as title, effective date 2 weeks from now. Sentence 2 acknowledges something specific you learned, or a specific opportunity the role provided. Not generic thanks, specific reference. The experience leading the Q3 product launch taught me how to manage cross-functional stakeholder alignment under compressed timelines. Sentence 3 offers transition support. I'll document all active projects and make myself available to support knowledge transfer during the notice period. Sentence 4 is a single closing statement. I appreciate the opportunity to have been part of the team. That's the structure. No explanation of where you're going. No comparison between this role and the next one. No feedback on what could have been better. No emotional processing. The letter isn't for you. It's for the record that follows you. The document that gets forwarded, filed, referenced, and remembered is this one. And the only question that matters is whether it protects your future optionality. Everything else you want to say, every frustration you want to name, every critique you want to offer, you say in person during your exit conversation, or you don't say at all. The letter is a legal and relational record. Treat it like one. Number 6, the mechanism that remains after you leave. Marcus eventually figured this out, but not until after he'd already sent 3 resignation letters across different jobs, each one slightly more candid than the last. By the time he understood how the network operated, he'd already closed doors he didn't know were open. He writes differently now. 4 sentences, specific acknowledgement, transition offer, clean close. When he submits the letter, he knows it's going to move beyond the person he's addressing, and he writes it for the audience he can't see. The resignation letter isn't communication with your manager about your departure. It's documentation that enters a system designed to track and evaluate professional reputation across time. The system doesn't forget. It doesn't offer do-overs. It just keeps processing the information you gave it in the exact words you chose, for as long as your career continues.